Okay, so today I'm very pleased to be in a discussion with one of the great architects of California and perhaps the world at large, Glen, and one of the great architects of Oakland, California, at the very least, Matt Baran, and and the and the and great architect wannabe Dave on my Architect's Guide podcast. So um, we spoke. Matt and I have known each other for many years now, and he's also appeared on this podcast. And we met Glen at the Academy of Arts University, right? Isn't that where we both met him?
I think we all met through the Academy, yeah.
Yeah, and I actually met Glen through the movie that his daughter made on him earlier, and then I was very pleased to have made his acquaintance at the Academy of Arts, and just always enjoyed talking to him. I enjoyed that movie so much, and
it's called My Father the Genius. Let's get it out. We get the word.
Yeah. Called My Father the Genius. Yeah.
I made my girlfriend watch it just about 2 weeks ago, Glenn. Just FYI, she's now a convert, also spreading the word.
Well, what was her reaction? Did she throw you out the door?
No, she loved it, and
really?
that's her background is media and entertainment.
Oh,
so
I see.
That's saying something.
She didn't say that. That reminds me of you, Matt. That's what you're like.
No, she didn't. But that would have been too much of a compliment, possibly.
Okay. All right. Yeah. So one of the ways that I know you, Glenn, and certainly I think that movie kind of gave the flavor of the architect is visionary. And I guess I could start there. I mean, how do you feel about that label, being the visionary genius of architecture?
Well, I think it's a very complimentary thing to be, but it has its baggage to get there and be there and stay there and want to be there and all the rest that goes with it. So I was just, if you did a little bit of my history, you were supposed to read about me. And, but I was just a really normal guy from West LA, sort of a track star and all that stuff, and went off to the University of Oregon because I couldn't get in any other school. And they had an open policy there. And I had some great professors like Alvin Borarsky headed up the AA in London a few years later. And so I was in heaven, and I've always been in heaven since then. But that architecture was, serving the rich, just do another cool project for somebody and, make a buck and be happy. And even at that scale, what that means, you'll probably both do it. You throw yourself into the projects that you love and hope they carry them just financially, but usually they don't. And you use the other projects to support that. And that was what I was doing until I got a master's at Cranbrook, and after working in offices for 4 years, and what they gave me was they said literally, here's a scholarship, everything's covered, and you can just think. And so that changed my life, and I haven't been the same since. So, so come
well. I mean, one of the things I know that I've spoken with Matt about, and that he and I often talk about, is like how we define. I think for architects themselves, I think there's a lot of ways of defining the profession, and we could all probably agree that there's like 98% of the profession is engaged in serving prosaic clients. You get a client for a house, you get a client for multifamily, and you have a career answering very prosaic needs within the context of we've all struggled in our way with the jurisdictions, these local jurisdictions that don't even allow you to do experimental things. And recently I spoke to Matt about really looking closely again at Frank Lloyd Wright's buildings and saying, oh my God, if I just did one of those, if I could just do Frank Lloyd Wright in 1938, I'd be happy. And then there's this other side of it. And I think Matt's been experimenting with it. I've been experimenting with it, which is and I know, and you seem you have seemed, Glenn, to be so committed to it, which is really trying to extend and operating as your own client in a way, and really just examining what architecture can be without the constraints of a client. And maybe maybe I'll reduce this panel. I think the way the recording goes is I can go back to your slides here. This is the vagaries of you guys still there?
Still
We're
here.
here.
Yeah.
That's a biomorphic biosphere interior. Biomorphic biosphere is the thing I did for Los Angeles after doing my thesis at Cranbrook on a vertical city thing.
Yeah.
So I was hooked in, I guess, 1965, and I ended this period about 1976 or something. Anyway. And I'm hooked for the rest of my life. It's like going to the top of the mountain, and when you get there, you come down and you start functioning with how to fit in some way. And then I realized I should have been on the mountain most of the time, just cranking it out, because this society lacks vision. I feel, if I'm as far as I'm concerned, you got one that shows the area of the LA basin where I'm just sitting in the LA basin there.
From these images?
Well, yeah, I sent you a lot of images. Well,
Yeah, I mean, I just loaded a lot of these on.
Let's see, go back. Let's see. I don't think you have one of the basin, but let's go to the one previously. Go back a couple. Yeah, no. We're not finding it. Okay, this is just a house. I mean, a flying house that looks like a flower. But,
well, I did want to say something that I was thinking about. I was reading up actually in preparation for this afternoon on Le Corbusier's Ideal Cities, and he was criticized for the rigidity. As an urban planner, I think he was probably rightfully criticized for how rigid his proposals were, and that there was a certain fascism about how he conceived of wiping out a portion of Paris. When I read up on your work, Glenn, it's actually not, you're actually very delicate about how you go into Los Angeles, and kind of you're kind of protecting LA and letting people kind of move into this without necessarily. And the other thing is that this is so fluid and so much more organic. It doesn't seem it's almost like you were reacting against doing anything rigid when you were developing. I mean, do you have did you have any feelings about some of the ideal? I know you were influenced by Paulo Sierra, but
well, I used to teach visionary. I had a course at SCI-Arc. I was a founder of SCI-Arc. Yeah. Anyway, and I taught there, and I had this course called Visionary Architects, and so of course I studied Le Corbusier and all the dreamers that were Ledoux and so on, that were proposing stuff that was beyond. And I thought Corbusier got sort of a bad rap because it was like stiff, like you're saying, but all his units, when you get inside, he's got somebody, some beautiful woman that I was like, and then he's got somebody punching a punching bag, and he's got all the down on the ground, everybody's running around under the trees and so on, like, and basically that has been our pattern in our cities, but it didn't work like he was proposing. None of the greenery or the blocks and everything else that happened like that. The closest I've seen that happen is in I think it was Savannah, Georgia. You know, it was a prison town, and every other block was a park. If you ever studied that one, and it's amazing. You know, dropping the park into the rectangular grid and so on. So anyway, I think you got to be conscious. You know, and the whole thing of the Paris. You know, the you know. What's the Haussmann, you know, Napoleon wanted to move his troops, so they created these broad avenues so they could move the troops as fast as they could to put down the rebellions that were happening in certain neighborhoods. And they built that, and everybody talks about these wonderful avenues that are cutting across this medieval planning and everything. You know, that was big scale thinking, but it was probably for the wrong reasons. And so I was trying to, when I addressed this project, to take a situation which Los Angeles, which I was raised in, and but I feel that way towards every city. I know everybody loves San Francisco, and I lived there off and on at different times, and I must say it drives me crazy if I go back there now. It's so, and I drive to LA, and I'm so happy to get back to the desert now. It's just like I feel that there's a failure of mankind to really address what sort of humans want in terms of the nature and outdoors and all the things I relate to.
Was that different, Glenn, when you were there, when you were working, when you're younger, earlier years? What changed?
What changed? Yeah, it was different. Well, I didn't know any difference. See, my father was raised in Detroit, and his father was one of the inventors for Henry Ford and Edsel Ford. So, and he was scheduled. My father was scheduled to marry Edsel Ford's daughter. So he was right into the link of creativeness and everything. And tragically, he developed TB and had to escape and go to his uncle's ranch in Nevada to recover. But anyway, he thought when he got to Los Angeles, he thought that was the most beautiful place in the world, and had all these orange trees and everything else. And he said, "This is paradise, Glenn. I've been all around the world, and this is paradise." So I didn't know anything other than Los Angeles, and that was my read until I went off to Oregon, and Oregon was just like a northern jungle. It was so gorgeous, and you know, everything was growing from the crack in the pavement to everything else. Everything was alive, and it was a whole dimension that I never even experienced. So I realized there's other ways of living and so on.
My question is, what's changed in Los Angeles from when you first moved there to what it's like when you go visit now? Is it different?
Oh yeah, it's the infrastructure doesn't work. I mean, they got all the freeways, but on rush hour traffic, you just behave like you know what it's like. You're in the Bay Area.
I do. I mean, I'm in LA once a month.
Sitting behind, going 2 miles an hour or 5 miles an hour, and
yeah, I was just curious.
Podcast or whatever it is.
Yeah, I was just curious how you felt about it yourself. I mean, do you think that the things that you were proposing when you initially worked on these things were things that would solve the problems that they have now? I mean, if it was implemented then, LA wouldn't be having the problems it has now. If it was implemented now, would it solve the problems it has today?
Well, I don't know whether wasn't familiar with LA having a park system that was really intense and so on. So I didn't know what I lived in the West Side, all the architects at that time lived in the West Side, because the
different
West Side is next to the ocean, and you got
Yep.
that, and you got all the waves, and then it's lush greenery in most cases. And Ray Cappy lived in a canyon that had a spring right under it, and so he had all the ferns he wanted, and so there's a way of it's escaping in Los Angeles. Bel Air with, those rich people that in the movie industry live like kings. I mean, they use, you go onto their properties, it's just gorgeous, and pools and lush everything. Anyway, so and that was LA to me. I wasn't familiar with the heavy end other than going once visiting something, who was that architect? I forget his name. Anyway, in Watts over there, and somebody told me, why do you go home? And so and that was a whole different type of environment, and pretty rough and beat up. So that was a different LA that I hadn't even experienced.
But were the projects that were like, was the biomorphic biosphere or maybe something else? I was looking through some of these, and now I forget the name of the project, but there was one that was specifically, one was in Venice and one was in LA. And I'm wondering, were they intended to sort of fix Los Angeles's problems? Let me see if I can pull this up.
These minor things, the minor ones, yeah. Well, the green machine was basically
Oh, I have some slides on that.
that one, yeah. That's the green machine. Yeah, that was coming down off the top of the mountain. And actually the next project I did, which was, I had a chance to buy I had a chance to buy a trailer park, and Calvin Hamilton was the director of planning, and I went to see him in LA, and he said, forget about doing it yourself. We can build it with the National Endowment of Art and a federal block grant. And I got all excited, and I got some money to hire all these consultants that were just waiting to do something, and they were so happy to do it. And they're nerds, and I'm not a nerd, and so they were unbelievable. Like Peter Pierce, the structural guy, was the guy who did Biosphere 2, and anyway, that thing that you're supposed to live in for 8 years and so on. So they were very skilled in terms of sealants and putting joints together and all the other stuff. And so that was wonderful. And so, but Reagan came into power at that moment, and Carter was out, which was backing all this type of thinking, and Councilwoman, ran for cover, and project was killed. And so I guess that was my wake up reality of really coming head on with the way things function, and they're very political, and so on and things like that. And I was actually thinking today, that I probably should have gone and built that on that trailer park, that I could afford to buy, and do it personally myself so I could get it done. But I might have been killed by the end of it, but anyway, because of the neighborhood and everything. But I would have gotten it done in the way that I wanted to, whereas the other never happened. So what does that mean? I mean, we don't have any power. I didn't have any power. So
I mean, I keep asking this question of like, if it was supposed to fix LA. I mean, Dave and I, when we did this, we talked a bunch about, if architecture can save the world, for lack of a better way of putting it. But I'm wondering, what was your motivation? Like, what was your sort of psychology when at the time? Was it just like, I want to build this thing because it's beautiful, or was it because it was going to help people, or was it because it was the right thing to do, or what was the reason?
I think your question, is it beautiful or not? I find it the most ugly project, one of the most ugly projects I ever did. So I didn't find it.
I like it the most.
Everybody did space frames and things like that and so on, and it was a way of practically doing it, but it wasn't beautiful in my category, and I didn't feel it was going to save the world. I was trying to put everything into it. It was self-sustained as much as possible, recycling and energy and subsurface irrigation and all the rest of the things that had been going into the biomorphic at a very small scale, and just saying, this is the way you should start thinking. And it was very small in comparison, but it was in a neighborhood that had all these ticky-tack buildings that, probably I had a few in there myself, so I understood the game of building that way. And and yet the developers and everybody came out of the woodwork to oppose it because it was so different and it was challenging. And it was Title 28, which was dealing with the poor. I mean, basically, it was giving them a space to interact in a different way than they had. It wasn't labeled as a horrible monster that you have to live in. It was labeled as an experiment to try to be socially interactive. And I felt it always would probably end up with the intellectuals in it, because normal people can't. They want something big. They go to the movies and everybody sees a big house, and there's even the poor people, and they say they want that, and that's why all these little houses that we have, these things like holding the horse's reins or something in front of the lawn to emphasize that they're just like the rich people. So everybody wants to be that category, and this was quite different. It was, you'd have to be sort of a weirdo in lots of ways to appreciate it, but it would be great to be in. I would love to live in it, and I know a lot of people. Don't you have the interiors pictures of that? I sent you a couple.
Did I download them?
There it is.
You can also. It almost sounds like, though, when I ask the reason, it almost sounds like it was more an experiment or out of curiosity, or just it doesn't seem like there was necessarily a big overarching kind of hope or anything. The way you're describing it, it sounds like more of an experiment. I don't know if I'm missing.
I agree with that. I don't have any problems with that assessment. I wish they'd done it to experiment with it. So, because I think it would have been interesting as an experiment. And I didn't know how those people were going to behave in it and everything else as well. The Marseille block, that was, if you read about it, had all the most beautiful intentions when it was built, and it didn't function that well when it was finally built, and people reacted differently and so on. But I think the Green Machine was much more softer and, nicer, and it had a park at the bottom and a garden and, vegetable.
Well, I think that's true of the biosphere as well. No question. The biosphere is very, for something with so much ambition, it's actually a very light touch on the land, which I thought was very interesting. One of the things I teach my students is the degree to which concrete is is flooding over the earth. It's shocking when you read up on that, how much concrete is being used. It's increasing day by day. It's like completely anti-environmental. And your city project, unlike Arcosani, in a way, for argument's sake, is barely touching the ground, right? The biosphere. There wasn't really.
Right. It was. Yeah. It had. It was putting the land back to where it was. I feel very strongly about that. I did you probably wouldn't find it, but I did this thing in there. It's called Downtown Troposphere, and that was my last big scale urban planning for existing cities. And
so I'm curious on that point, because how is it intended to engage with an existing city? Was it meant to replace the city, or was it meant to be grafted onto the city? Because in all the images I see, they're kind of more like floating, I don't.
You don't have this. There's a series of slides, I think, shows.
Yeah, I downloaded a number of them, but yeah.
There's a growth pattern that shows how it begins. Anyway, it doesn't. I don't see that happening on these images. Right. So it starts very small, and it's not very challenging anybody.
Yeah, that's all I had.
Is it liked or not liked? And if it doesn't like, it stops and becomes a Disneyland or something. So, I think.
So the idea was eventually grow, intermesh with an existing city potentially.
Right. They're all the whole idea.
Right. This Archograms had some idea. They had some ideas around this, like the pop-up city, or even the walking city or any of those things.
They didn't. Archigram was a pop culture thing, so
Right.
they were very good at that. But I was always very serious from the word
Yeah, they
go.
were.
I remember Ron Heron, which was part of Archigram, and he taught at Cal Poly Pomona where I was. And anyway, and he was giving a lecture, and he shows us pictures, and there wasn't a blade of grass anywhere. And I said, "Well, Ron, there's not any grass, or there's no plants in this thing." And he says, "I hate plants." So anyway, and then Zaha as well, she gives a lecture at SCI-Arc, and I asked the same question. The Hong Kong Peak competition, which I entered in, I think I had a pretty good team. And I said, "Well, what happened to the hill where, it was, had vegetation and everything on it?" And she said, "Well, I just mowed it all down. I don't like nature." And of course, 10 years later, she has to like nature because the green movement was so strong. So again, she was wonderful forms and into looks and all that stuff, but there's a moral issue of, I think, connecting to nature. And if you feel that, and I felt that as a kid, climbing trees and playing Robin Hood and everything, it was so neat to be in nature. I loved that. Where I guess other people saw it as foreign and they didn't want to interact. So I don't know. I think that, you have all these people that want to go to the beach, and they clamor to get to the beach, and they walk and they talk and they hold hands and they make love and all that stuff. And so they're very in tune with that whole world. And so I think it's an attraction that people have innately. So some people anyway, but we've gotten to a society that's so dependent on not having nature. It's like now they're saying, "Oh my God, we better interact because nature's sort of whacking us a little here." And I don't know. Anyway, that's.
Well, I wonder about that from the standpoint of, what strikes me is what you're saying about, Zaha or Ron Heron, or I don't know, anybody else that we've talked about before or after this conversation, that architecture has this indoctrination that you go through, and it teaches you, at least nowadays it seems, to think a certain way, and that certain way
to conform.
Yeah, but it tends to be outside of the way that most people think. Most people that I talk to, they say, "Well, give me a Victorian," or
Right.
Majority.
Spanish colonial.
Yeah,
You don't even get the Palladio anyway. Go on.
I don't know that that's a bad thing to kind of like that kind of preconception to me, and this may be my own kind of brainwashing speaking, that that to me is shallow, and it doesn't speak to form and space and some of the things we learn about. However, there may be also things of interest that we are forced to let go in our training that maybe we should hang on to, plants or nature being one of them. It's like, it's only cool to make really sweeping, beautiful, egotistical, single-minded forms, and it shouldn't consider, how people want to live, or, if they like nature or anything else. I think that that might be part of the issue. And I think what's interesting even about talking about your work, Glenn, and I don't know how you feel about it, is maybe it's an attempt to do both. I think you want these large scale gestures. It's very much about your hand in it, but it's not about rejecting the sort of populist kind of view. But I've also know you've said the masses are asses, so I don't know. You tell me.
All right.
I hadn't heard that one.
Oh yeah, it's in the movie. I just watched the
movie.
Oh, thanks.
I had this girlfriend, Jan Marty, and she told me about that, and I picked up on it right away. Anyway, because I think they are limited, and I'm very interested in the word beauty and what people think about beauty, and it's almost universal. They like nature. That seems to be a category. But when you move to the idea that they're going to live in it, they always, as you mentioned, sort of go back to things that they're familiar with. And they like things that are boxes and something like they've seen and that's old, and they can, it's like the movie stars are constantly building Pueblo type of, stuff and French provincial or whatever, so it's natural gratification. And so I thought, because I do all this curvy stuff, that I never thought I was a boxy guy, and that they should really get behind me on all those curves. But it's not true. So that one. So the only people I think I can relate to are the youth. I think the youth is much more open in terms of what they like. In a form, they're rebelling against their parents, and they like the idea that they want to do something strange and different. And so if they do something curvy like this, they might say that's wonderful. So and the parents will be dragged into it. Just look at what happened. Look at your hair, come on, so finally they dragged old guys into wearing long hair and things like that. So
the number one complaint I get from my critics on my own work, the number one complaint is that we make boxes and the buildings are too boxy. But the funny thing about that is you put a pitched roof on it, and for them it's not a box anymore.
Right.
So it's not about
I've always liked your line, Matt, that they're not, again, 99% of what the profession does is the manipulation of boxes. That's a Matt Baran line.
Is it?
And yeah, I'm quoting you. But and I always initially I found that it was true. It's true. But I was like, oh my God, that's what I'm doing. Mostly manipulating boxes. And then you look at so that there's a wonderful resistance to the box. Maybe it's in your work, Glenn. I think in general.
I don't dislike the box. I just like the more of them, the better. Because at some point they're like pixels, and so you can make anything out of pixels.
Well, your recent work, come on, you're throwing a flying house out every 3 seconds on your computer or something, and they're all boxes, but they've got pitched roofs and slanted walls and this funny thing and that funny thing. God, you're just jumping up and down with a box and putting all these masks and on around it and everything like that. So I actually
do in the United States, certainly the dominance of the lumber industry is one of the things that has made it so difficult to deviate from the box. So that when
right, you're showing right in front of me, that's all wood. I mean, that's easy to build with a curved sill plate. I mean, geez.
But it's more expensive than a box.
Oh yeah.
Right.
Given to me, I could build it rather easily. You have to train the damn carpenter to do it right, so and then he gets it wrong. And so anyway.
But 3D printing's coming on. It's gonna allow for less expensive versions of the curve, probably. Like this guy is probably already getting done versions of these types of things because of 3D printing. Like companies like Icon, etc.
Well, fortunately, that's all concrete, though, as you were just
and
talking.
then it's all concrete. That's right.
No, that was all tropical. It was all sort of bamboo and stucco and stuff like that. So anyway.
Right.
All right. That's in Managua. That's in Nicaragua. That's in Saudi Arabia. And that's in Abu Dhabi, which is similar to Saudi Arabia. That's a golf club on the left there. The other one's a sort of a tent type of what is it? I'm at lost words. It's sort of like a circus. It comes down and goes up and traveling.
Oh yeah.
And it was all worked out so it just could collapse and be hauled away and things like that. So carnival type thing. It was all for some guy who was all into eco stuff and dancing and spiritual this and anyway, didn't happen. Anyway.
Are these watercolors, by the way?
What?
Are these watercolors?
Yeah, those are both watercolors.
Pencil and
When
watercolor,
I get in trouble, I do a watercolor on them.
right?
When do you get in trouble?
I can do them. I can still do them, but you know, and it's in a way. I just have to tell you, both of you guys are doing these computer imaging right now, and you send them over to me, and they're just amazing. And how fast you make one morning, and you make 3 the next day, and this sort of thing. It's just amazing. So you got the tool, so it's wonderful. You can do that. I
I
see
mean,
this is watercolor, and I had to. That's the only way. I take a picture of a model and I bang it out, and that's it. But it takes a while. But there is a certain, I don't know, charm about it. Mhm.
well, it's also, you know, I mean, that's a whole other conversation potentially, but I've been struggling with going back and forth between those things because yeah, you can type in an idea and generate an image in minutes, and then you can modify the image and add images and tweak it. But you know, there is a degree of control in, you know, still drawing with my hand, which I still post images of my own
Yeah,
hand,
yeah.
but they
What's
take.
that about? What is that about? Why are you doing that?
Why am I doing all the images?
Yeah, well, I see that in you. You have a split personality. One minute both of you guys do that. One minute you're drawing something with your hand, and the next minute you're doing some computer thing banged out. And
I mean, for me at this point, I mean, when I was in school, it was all like a lot of the stuff was me learning digital tools. And so we were kind of in this sort of split world of, you know, maybe more. I still had a Mayline in school, but I also had a computer, and every tool that I can grab and use to make something, you know, I want to do that. And you know, it's just I talked to my girlfriend. I said, why do you think I do it? And she says, you just need to get it out. And I don't know that it's those images and the sketching and all the things I'm doing. They're not about, you know, it's not about a money. It's not about even building something, because it's, you know, no client that I have is going to build that. I mean, it may infiltrate, and I hope that it does infiltrate my work, and that, you know, there may be a client along the way that will be interested in doing something a little more radical. But for now, that's the outlet I have. I mean, look at the projects that you have. You have all these emails that you sent with just this massive body of work that you say in your email that this is not even, you know, the tip of the iceberg, as it were. But, you know, why did you do it? That's what I was trying to ask you earlier when I said, was it to change the world or fix Los Angeles, or, you know, why? I don't have an answer. I was hoping you did.
well, I think it's cool. I think, you know, I think it's
Well,
I think nature's cool, and when
what's been driving you? What's been driving your career to?
Yeah, because you put so much effort, like this lifetime of effort. What's telling you to do it? I mean, like a lot of people talk these days about burnout, you know, and they're tired of doing it, and you know, they've been doing it for so long, and they're just ready to give up, you know. But you're still doing it.
Christian, hand me that big model, Maqueta Grande. Yeah. I'm having my wife show you something that I'm doing. Yeah, let's see. Can you wait a second? Let's see this.
I can enlarge things here.
Yeah, that's what drives me. All right, come on. Can you get that one, blow that one up and put it on the screen?
Yeah,
Well, I enlarged it for the recording, I guess.
Well, we only see this little picture on the right, and that's it. You can't throw it on the big screen.
No, it's enlarged. It depends on what you're looking at, Glenn. I think the one that's being recorded is showing it full screen.
I guess I'll find that
The
out.
one with you see my image with my hat and my full screen, or not?
Yes, you are.
I'm full screen on mine. I'm not. So,
well, when you are, yeah.
Okay. Yeah, there it is. It's an interchange. for downtown Joshua Tree. And why? You know, I've
Yep.
worked on it with about 2,000 hours in it and haven't received a penny. And half the community hates me, and I think it's wonderful. And I think it would save lives, and kids would love it. People would be the center of town and make it ecological and tie into the beautiful rocks and everything in the area. And so I guess that's what drives me. And it's, you're right, it's not depending on money. And that I think is something I don't, I'm so, you know, I've owned 5 houses at one time, so I know the money game, but you know, I didn't respect it and I didn't take care of it. But money has never been a driving element in my life. And so I don't put value on it. And other people do. And if you put value on earning money, you're going to eventually do what that client we started out wants you to do in one form or another. So, and that client, unless they're some wonderful person, you're going to end up just doing what they want, even though it's creative and wonderful. I think, you know, a lot of good projects are done. I mean, Frank Gehry does some great projects, but they're sculptural and other people do it, and even ecological ones. And so, but they're usually very small scale. A college campus or something is about the biggest. Now they're talking about whole towns and this, and they want to work about the infrastructure. And now they realize the water is going the wrong way, and this is screwing up, and the plastics everywhere. And I feel all that was very important when I went up to the top of the mountain. And on every project I do, I try to incorporate that type of thinking. But you're right, it's not going to change the world. It's just sort of say, this is a direction. But, you know, the regional planning is of a scale that really matters. And I don't know whether mankind is up for the challenge.
Well, let me ask you this, though. I mean, you had these massive visions that were, let's just say, the radical rethinking of things, right? And you're talking about, you know, the idea that people aren't ready for it, so they didn't necessarily get built. But is there any use to doing things at a smaller scale and getting it built so that at least something's happening? You know, if you're putting solar panels or recycling water or doing incremental advancements in whatever the objective is, beauty, functionality, sustainability, whatever, saving lives, you know, this whole, like you said, I just remember you saying something about it might save lives, you know, it's like, but if you do these very large scale, huge gestures that don't have a very long shot of getting done versus, say, a small intervention, a 10 by 10 tiny home with composting toilets or whatever, are you what's having more impact? Are you
talking about yourself or something?
No.
Because what you're proposing is, it needs a client. I have nothing against the large scale thinking. It needs a client that can manipulate and do that. And if say any real powerful person with a lot of money, Warren Buffett, could just snap his fingers and build, you know, a town like that I'm proposing instantly if he wanted to. And I ran track with Phil Knight, you know, as head of Nike, and I go to breakfasts with him and stuff like that, and he could snap his fingers and build whatever he wanted to do as well. But they don't want to. So what does that mean? They have the money, they just don't want to do the projects.
But it's not happening. So in the world we live in,
Right,
where people don't want to build environmentally friendly mega cities,
right.
how do you get how do you accomplish environmental objectives if that's your objective, or anything else?
Why put it on to me? Why don't you do it? You know,
Because
you're young, you got the skills.
I'm not interested.
What?
I'm not interested. I think
Okay,
you are.
right. So that says a lot, you know, you gotta find somebody that would, but I look at the youth, I'm 85 years old, and, you know, what do I got left? Not much. And I think that the youth is the answer. I mean, they've always been there, and they're
So that's
all
the
these
question. Let me
computer
ask-
skills and everything, and they all, if you know, they go to all these private schools, and the father's got tons of money and this and that, and all they have to do is make one connection, and boom, you're going to get something.
Well,
And
I do think that the generation, you know, the 60s generation, Glenn,
Yeah.
there was a little moment. And of course, you know, you could argue it was it was San Francisco and, you know, 67 and some spirit of the moment, Berkeley. And you're part of that. And I
Right.
think that, I actually think that there is definite connections between your work and Archigram and all, you know, because there was visionary architects, very, very imaginative, hardworking architects who made it their business to do things like you did with the biosphere. And I do think I think it's missing. I actually think it's gone. There's a certain amount of idealism that doesn't exist anymore, man. You know what I
I
mean?
don't know. I had a group from Cornell come out just recently. None of them were architects, but they're all students, and they were rock climbing out here and found out I lived here and liked my work, so they came out, and I didn't have to encourage them at all. They believed that everybody should get a fair shake financially, and everything should be green, and nobody should be killing each other, and da da da. It was all everything we're talking about in the hippie movement. And so I think the youth is starting to wake up. It's the communication system now. You know, you can't hide things from them. And so that's the dictators and everything else are really upset about that. They can't control everything. And so, and the youth is rebelling in lots of instances. And so it's just a matter of time. So they put it all together, and, you know, nature seems to be saying, well, I don't go along with it right now. And everybody's a little scared about that. A lot of people anyway. So.
But I mean, that, you know, it's interesting because that sounds more like grassroots and people operating at a kind of level below the radar, let's say, and that they may go out, you know, there's a huge tiny home movement or whatever it is. And there are young people that are saying, you know, you were talking about it earlier. I don't want the big mansion, you know, the McMansion. I want a tiny home I can take with where I go. I don't need that much stuff. I can live in a smaller footprint. It remains to be seen as generations come up and they make more money and come out of school. And, you know, there's a curve for a lot of people. You know, even all the wealthy people here that used to be hippies in Berkeley are now private landowners in the hill that don't want anyone to come and build anything there because they have their mansions and they're very happy with that. But, you know, we'll see if the people change as they get older. But this movement of moving under the radar is not like wipe out everything, have a revolution. I think it's much more, I'm going to subvert things from within or from underneath. That's what I see a lot of people doing, as opposed to, you know, trying to blow up everything and start over. And I don't know if what you think about that, because a lot of the proposals are not small scale, they're very large scale. And if maybe you think that this movement of young people will at some point rise up and remake cities or not.
Well, I'm not the one to say whether that's going to happen or not. I mean, it's just
well, it's a question. You can speculate. You were speculating a second ago about, you know, having hope in the youth. I mean, I don't know either. I don't have the answer.
I'm not seeing that. I think it's coming in strange ways, like the line, you know, for instance, in Saudi Arabia, you know, right?
But that's coming from a dictator. Come on, that's coming.
I know.
He wants to put his name on the map, and he wants to do something significant.
Right.
So this is what his dream is, and he's pursuing it with vigor. So anyway.
Dave, you're saying you're not seeing it, like you don't see people stepping outside of their norm,
their wheelhouse. And I think it's not being taught either, right? Grand visions, I think, to Glen's point, it's like, yeah, we're seeing quote unquote top of the pyramid architects working for, you know, a fascist government, Saudi Arabia. And that's where the ideal city's at. And so this whole question of, and then there has been a critique.
Yeah, I was in Abu Dhabi. I
Yeah.
had a student that got me over there, and I did a bunch of proposals. And I shouldn't have been there. I realize now it was not the place to be.
You mean
So,
from a moral or ethical standpoint?
right, a moral ethic thing.
Yeah.
So I wasn't cognizant of it more. I was balled out. I was balled out when I got back from some people that I respect, and then I had to look at that, and they said, yeah, I was there just like this whore doing something for $1, and yet it was all ecological. I was proposing all that and doing everything I believed in,
but is there anywhere that one should be if money is involved, let's say, you kind of have this advantage of being able to say, I didn't muddy any of these projects with a paid commission, right? But without the paid commission, they don't get built. But what happens when they do get built, if you're in place in an environment where things get built and there is money exchanging hands and all the things that come with that, is there any moral place to be? I mean, I think there are places where, people are building homeless, cities. There's cities for the homeless, like small cities for the homeless, or whatever it may be. There may be a moral place where money is still exchanging hands, a moral place to be. But even those, you can argue, like the minute it turns to reality, there's gonna be a hole. Like those cities that they're creating that you see made out of containers, and they're all one story because nobody wants to put stairs, and so this sort of sea of containers, and they're all painted white. Is that an okay place to ask people to live? Is that going to uplift anyone's spirit? Or is it a prison camp in a way? So I don't know. I feel like the minute that something it turns concrete, there's always going to be a way to criticize it. If it exists in fantasy, well, it could be anything you want it to be. You could say it does whatever you want it to do. It's going to fly. It's going to, it's going to rescue people from wars or whatever you want to say. But if it doesn't exist, then it's just talk.
Well, let's talk about these. I totally agree with these sort of outhouses proposals for the homeless, and they're ridiculous and ugly and awful and everything else. And I think they create slums really versus any contribution to a person's quality in life and everything that goes with it. So I don't know why we can't make, and it, you've been dealing with apartments and so on, like you can make a lot with small spaces that are very entertaining and people love them, and you have a whole bunch of facilities that interact and make sense. But when you start to look at the economics, then you're the land, oh my God, the land's worth so much money, and then we're going to triple the price of building it because we want to make a lot of money on building it, and on and on. And so the end result is not an expression of what really the cost is. It's an expression of, I would say, development as we know it being very greedy. And that just seems to be a constant pattern. I don't know why that is. This idea of not, I was World War II, and they had they limited what you charge for milk and everything else. And everybody did that, and everybody made money. But right after the war, when they lifted all that, the prices shot up. So, and it's not that the person doesn't want a fair profit; they want a lot of profit. And so, what is that? It's human nature of being greedy, and it's so.
Well, I mean, like in my experience, I've done real estate development, and I've also seen people that do real estate development. And in my deals, I've lost money on one and made very little on another. And I think you've done some deals yourself, Glenn. I don't know, but it's not so easy. And I think that a lot of the reason that there is this trope, it's like in the movie, you talk about watching movies. Every movie that needs a bad guy that's tearing down the orphanage, it's a developer. And that is the sort of the thing that you're told. But what I see in a lot of developers is a lot of bankruptcy, I see a lot of people that don't make money. I see some people that hit real home runs because they're being very cautious and trying to save money at every turn. And for them, a lot of it is the only way to survive. I mean, to go out and just sort of give it away, it's not so easy. And the thing is, I guess if you made enough money, maybe at some point you could give it away. If you're Warren Buffett, it doesn't tend to happen because you've had years and years and years of trying to survive and make it happen. But, I've seen a lot of hardship in that profession because there is no safety net. I mean, if the government stepped up and said, let's actually put money into this and take care of people so that a developer didn't have to risk his neck, to sort of feed his family because he went out and built affordable housing that never penciled and he didn't make any money, but the government doesn't do it either. They tax you and they take money on impact fees. I've seen it, $20,000 a unit to build market rate housing. And all that money is supposed to go into affordable housing. I've seen it in Oakland. Where is it? Where's the money? They've been collecting it for 10 years. And I've never seen a project built, an affordable housing project built with Oakland impact fee money, so it's not corruption or greed at the developer level alone. It's probably corruption and greed at every level, corruption, greed, power grabbing, whatever it might be.
Yeah, but so, I've often quoted Ken Frampton, who was my history teacher at Columbia University. In various ways, he always he tried to imbue in us this idea of architecture as resistance. So going back to the biosphere, that you could easily argue that's a resistant. Some of the best qualities of it is that it's resisting sprawl and in its ambitions, and it's resisting what was contemporary in the 60s, which we're still doing now. But I still think that we're all just, it's a tidal wave of conformity that is almost impossible to resist. Where again, I could say that if I can just convince a client to let me do falling water, I'd be like the happiest. Frank Lloyd Wright in 1930. I would be happy in terms of the ambitions to try to do a modernist, sculptural, spatially innovative, spatially connected to our techno-modernist time. And it just seems that one other comment is that there's this old Simon and Garfunkel song on Frank Lloyd Wright: architects may come, architects may go, and never change your point of view. I often say that to clients because they're so overwhelming in wanting prosaic work, and I don't know if we had this brief moment post-war, starting maybe what it Broadacre City, I think is 19. It's in between the wars. I think so. Or maybe a little later. But we had certain architects doing ideal cities in the contemporary movement. And to a certain extent, I don't know if you talk about the biosphere as being an ideal city, Glenn. Do you consider it an ideal city in that genre?
The biomorphic biosphere being an ideal city?
Yeah, like a utopic. Is it utopia?
Well, on the last video I did just recently, watched it. It's like there's a lot. You can put the same people in it, but if the same people would behave the same way they do now, it would be pretty
disastrous.
Be a lot of bad things happening, and somebody said it'd be a great terrorist place to do things. And so you got to. I think it's an evolution of the psychic. You have to sort of get people off the track of trying to earn a bunch of bucks and this and that, or have to have this or have to have that, and so it's a whole movement of going to a higher level, and whether humanity can do that is very questionable, because they seem to want to learn it all over again, versus learning from history. So that's not my, I could, Plato talked about sort of having a society that's run with intellectuals that really care about you. You're raised and you're trained to just care about people, and that's your aim, and you're going to take care of the society, and and you don't become political. That's somehow that gets to the person, and they have more knowledge, and they can make decisions based on things that will benefit the people. And whereas we have a system that relies on the money, really, and that seems to be the governing element, and so that's very strange. I wanted to react to Matt's comment about the developer. I think maybe he should run for some president of developers or something. He made a great speech on that, which I didn't ever find that. I've done some development, but I never lost I lost everything when I got sort of living off the loan I had on property, and that's what happens. You get overextended, and then you lose everything. And probably for other people it's different, but that's what happened to me. And I just was very fortunate in a bunch of decisions I made. They made money because land keeps going up. But if you get caught in one of these waves, or in 2008, where everything just collapsed, and a lot of people went under, and I never came back. But the smart people that are into money, they all came back. They all manipulated and came back because they thought about money. They think. I just don't have that interest, other than
I
wanting
understand.
things to get.
Well, it
Well,
does.
Yeah,
Right.
but let me ask again though. Like Glenn, do you think that one of your roles as an architect over the course of your life was to resist the Spanish colonials that were going up in Hollywood or whatever? I mean, was resistance a part of how you thought about your
It's a great
career?
question.
Because
No,
I don't think Matt's is.
no, I think that
Yeah.
what was going up, and if you look at it, it covers up the land, it does this and that, and it takes in water from Northern California and a bunch of other stuff. So they were just zeroing in on a development, and versus what I was thinking about a large scale. So yes, I was opposed to all that, but so
I
anyway,
mean,
I think
Dave, that is, I think that my form of resistance is maybe a little bit different, because because my form of resistance is all the people that stand around telling me that developers are evil. I'm kind of resisting that, because I think a lot of them are going to help build density, which I think density is one of the key issues to actually make a difference in how we can continue to survive on this planet. And developers help with that, and money helps with that. So that's my form of resistance, is like build more. And I don't even know that I necessarily care how you build it. I have ideas, and I like being creative, and I know what I want to build, but I don't think everybody should build like me. But
But there was a lot. There's been a lot of writing on in the architectural press and in the New York Times, for that matter, about how all the multifamily housing. I'm guilty of this too. It may be modernist, but it all looks the same. And it's
I don't
just
know. Yeah, and that may or may not matter. I mean, that speaks to different issues, but it's like, first survive on the planet, and then talk about how to do it well. I think that getting density is again the hugest issue. I think resistance by doing radical things and not building them, I can understand what you're saying, but it's like my Instagram feed with all the robots and whatever it may be. Is that
that's
a form?
resistance.
I don't have any clients. I don't have to build anything. I don't have to worry about my budgets or
Right.
hiring people or anything else. Is it a form of resistance? But it's just vapor in the end. It's
Well,
like,
you
saving.
rationalize your existence of being a sellout. So okay, that's good, man.
You can,
You're doing a good job of defending yourself. Yeah. So
well, I mean, it's either rationalizing the sellout, or rationalize a do nothing, right? And I could be either. I could do nothing and say, look, at my work is so radical, it never got built, and I could rationalize that. Or I can say, hey, I've built stuff, and it makes a difference in its own way. I mean, everybody's rational
I had
existence.
today I got a letter from a young client, about 35, and very smart, and got a bunch of money, and he said I should be advising the governor what to do in this state. You know, that was his reaction, and he's a developer. So anyway, people have different points of view that, you know, that you got to be thinking regionally and this and that and so on and so on. I think that's where I'm going, and I think that will be carried, as I said, is not mine. It's be carried on by the youth and so on. But it does have an effect on. It was always, I never felt that the biomorphic biosphere was going to be built, but it was. I felt it was an inspiration, and I think it still is. And you probably could come down, way down from the hill, and make something talking about density. I totally agree with you, that would do both, you know, and so on. So I don't know. You haven't looked at my proposal of Downtown Troposphere that deals with existing cities. We should discuss that one, because that was my last attempt to come to grips with what is.
Did you not send that to us? Because I don't.
Nice. Well, it's on my blogs. I have 140 blogs. You can Downtown Troposphere. You can look it up.
You're doing it right.
Yeah. So, and I like to talk about that. You know.
Well, you could always share your screen, Matt, if you want to show his.
Well, I've got my phone there. I'd have to call in to
Okay.
I see it. You can just Google it, Dave. Google Downtown Troposphere, Glen Small, and it pops up, and you can pull it up on the screen.
Oh, okay. I can Downtown Troposphere.
Yep. I see. There's like, where is this? I see the skyline, and I see kind of looks like a suspension bridge in it.
Downtown Trap.
Tropi
Troposphere. Troposphere.
There you go.
Yeah, there it is. Those must, you know.
Oops. Okay, I'll have to reduce this.
There's another one. There's a second plate. Shows it more what it is.
We should do the next interview with Glen, just going through the blog. I've spent many hours perusing Glen's blog, and it's pretty great. And we could just click through it and could talk about projects.
You want me to so this image in particular?
No, it's off to the left is the one I want you. And there's another plate. Where is it? I don't know where it is.
Scroll down.
Should I click on this or?
There's more images.
Yeah, scroll down. There's more images.
Next.
What?
There.
No, keep going.
No, you got to go back, Dave. You got to close the window.
There's another one before this one.
No, this one, I have to go back again, I guess.
And if you close that window and you go into the blog and you scroll down, there's about 5-6 images.
Okay.
Up or down.
Oops, that's not it either.
I don't know the major image, but anyway, we'll take the one. We can take the images right on the left, on the right there, and go down. Oh, where is it?
Yeah, where is it?
Oh, you were at the one I wanted to talk about, and then you switched it.
Just go forward. There you go. No.
This one?
No. There, that's the one I wanted. Yeah. That's basically the idea, is that you take existing cities and just let them be what they are, and let the developer come in and develop the empty lots and everything else, but create this tension structure roof that really is translucent and can go to transparent, and it controls the inside of the temperature to be basically 67 to 80, 75 or something like that. And so you're living in the tropics, and all the paraphernalia that we use to separate ourselves from nature is dropped away. And so there's a huge savings, and then you cover all the buildings with foliage and everything else. And then you work on the ground plane of the infrastructure that, San Francisco really needs, but, they keep ignoring it. And especially in Oakland, every time I see one of your new buildings, Matt, I say, where is the infrastructure where they put a double road over the top to allow people to get in and things like that? So that, this is all addressing all that stuff. So anyway, it was generic. I mean, it had, because of the height and everything, it would have waterfalls that were coming down and shown on a couple spots, but it was be held up by these at the intersections of these very light compression members, which are no different than a, sail ship, very efficient in terms of structure. Anyway,
I'm gonna take this and I'm gonna feed it to the AI.
That's a great idea.
And you're
Actually.
gonna see it. I'm gonna generate one and send it to you. It's gonna
oh,
do
you're gonna right.
Yeah.
You're gonna put some daggers in it or something, ripping the roof or something.
And I do think that in some weird way, it's like the city, the whole urban vision, this whole kind of I'm going to change the world thing has seemed to, for better or for worse, seems to be going into virtual reality. Probably, it's like there's an escapist component of it.
What do you think
Well,
about
that's
reality?
justifying your world. I think it's a wonderful tool, as Matt talked about, a tool. I think it's a wonderful tool to walk you through here and seduce the people to live like this and things like this. And that's my objective. It's not sinister. I've always tried to, and as I said, every time I build something, and I have built something, you sort of seem to ignore that.
No, I had a
Every
couple
time
shots.
I've built something, somebody walks into it and they love it. So it's, I don't
Yeah.
I'm not creating things that people don't like. I mean, they love whatever I do. I did a thing out here, and it was a composer and a clown woman, and we had our issues building it, but they love it. So anyway, that's what I do. Anyway, all right.
Well, we could do round 2 or 3.
Are we wrapping it up? So virtual reality, just a tool. We're not gonna live there or anything, right?
You should do it right now and then load. Then
Well,
share
I
it.
think I just look at it as a tool to get people to be interested in building something like this. I don't look at it as just something to be pissing in the bathroom about. So I think you should take it very seriously. And I think, Matt, I think both of you are very extremely skilled. I see all this wood thing that David's doing, and all your stuff you're banging out in the middle of the woods and all that stuff. And you told me recently that you like clash and bang, so that's just where you're at. So you're a different animal, but so you can just say, and you said today that is just playing around, but I see that as all reality. I think you can make something that is very buildable and exciting, and people would want it. And so why don't you market that? I just think that's something that's so
I may
easy
take
for you to do.
I may take your advice.
Right. Yeah.
As you go sideways.
Yeah.
Um,
you can move this image, and I could explain more if you want to talk about this.
well, what's the name of the New York MoMA show?
What's the name? What?
What is the name of the show that you've been invited into?
I forget the name. It's a sort of ecological architecture show or something, and it's dealing with people from around 1950 or so to basically around the mid 80s or something like that. And you're talking about all these people that had ecological interests that were pushing this stuff, and Solari's in there, and I think
Right.
who else is in there? Wines is in it, and
Yeah.
James Wines is in there. And I got a letter from him the other day. He's doing some, I think it's his wife or his partner of some type, that they're doing all this ecological big scale planning on rural communities in California. He was boasting about it. So I hope that's reality. And he's 90 and is a wheelchair, so it's sad, anyway. So, but he's into that. And then there's mentioned some other people. I can't remember that. Anyway, there are a lot. There's 30 of them, so there's a lot of them. And can you imagine dealing with 30 egomaniacs, and so all at once, and you're having to satisfy their needs? And half of them are dead, and the other half are alive. So you have you have these groups, and I think these groups that are very dangerous, like a group that supports Frank Lloyd Wright. You know, Frank Lloyd Wright had such a broad interest, and he was always changing. He was always doing something really cool presently, and so on. And people get locked into one period or another period of his, when he was an example of a whole life. And so, and people change and have different things and so on. I see that in the Corbusier, and so, you know, look at Ronchon's compared to the house is a machine or something. Boy, what a difference.
Yeah, and it's still a very relevant
Right.
form. Yeah.
So, yeah, what I didn't like today was that it was sort of visually, it wasn't. We got it. These projects are very rational, and they, you know, I can just take you one step at a time. I have the imagery like that recent video they did, a 45 minutes by Harlan on me, and you know, that was a sequential thing, and that was lacking today if you want to explain a project. So if you bring up the biomorphic biosphere, you can't look at an image at one or two and talk about it, because that's not the project. So
the way we can do that, I think one way of doing that is to just go through the blog,
right,
and another, you know, with you. Another way is that we'd have to, in conjunction together, either you and Dave or you and I or whatever, create a PowerPoint slideshow that, you know, you'd have to create a slideshow that puts the images in the order that you'd want them to be.
right.
Yeah.
And then to discuss them image by image.
Right.
And I think that's actually a great thing to do. I think the easiest way of doing that is just, you know, and I can drive as well, but, you know, going to the blog and clicking on a blog post, your images are probably more organized on your blog than they are in an email. And we can go to the blog and we can go through project by project that way and pull up in full screen images one at a time and have a conversation sequentially, you know, around a sequence of projects or a sequence of images.
Well, you know, the problem, people have a very small attention span these days. They want to look at images, and they don't really want a verbal discussion about anything. And my whole life is, that's what I've outrun the world, in a sense. I've got too much. They don't want to hear it. And, you know, so anytime I want to explain it, you know, I can start this project I'm looking at right now. It has the earth, it starts down on the earth, and then it goes up, and then all these different elements and things that I, you know, that I design and I'm rational about, that needs to be explained. But, you know, they just want to look at an image and move on. So I don't know what
I talk about resistance, though. I mean, you know, that is one of the problems, is that people look at images, they just want to swipe through images, and I don't know if that's what I want to give into. I mean, you know,
it's not an interest of mine, but that's what they do. So yeah, I'm very, this last video thing I sent you, that Harlan picked two projects, and he didn't do it on the green machine, but he did make an effort on the biomorphic biosphere. And the Museum of Modern Art called me today, and they're coming to my garage, and they're having a professional photographer photograph everything in the highest quality, and So but they're only zeroed in on the two projects, and they're not, and I'm scared to death that there's not going to be enough information there for people to understand my poster, which you didn't put up here, you know, was my effort to try to convey a lot of information, and it still holds up when people don't want to look at a lot of stuff. The poster has a lot of information on it I can easily explain to people. So I told the Museum of Modern Art, blow that thing up 4 times or something, and let people look at it or something, because it has enough technical stuff, you know. You know, it's the whole thing. I'm fortunate I did those, and I had the patience to make ink drawings of them, and so they're very seductive.
Yeah.
terms of
I would
art,
say.
right? So,
Yeah.
and everybody, I've heard this time and time again, and it just doesn't interest me, is that, oh, just sell your stuff as art, Glenn, it's so beautiful. I'm not interested in that. I never have been. I'm an architect. I want to show how practical or how this really relates to having it happen. If you pointed it anywhere on the biomorphic biosphere and said that what happens here, I would go into a song and dance of exactly what happens there. So it's not something I'm not familiar with, and haven't done studies at every intersection and this and that, and it's on and on. I've just, as I said, I just sent a fraction of what my life has been about. But anyway, and I don't know, take a guy like Utzon that did the Sydney Opera House. The guy I did a couple other buildings, but nothing of significance. That was the one building he did, right? And everybody jumps up and down, and that's the one building. And then you start to get into that building, it's got some real flaws and things like that. So, but it's amazing that he, that whole thing was very fascinating. Errol Saarinen came a couple days late and asked where all the models were on it, and they'd already thrown out that winning scheme, actually winning scheme, and he went in the back room and found it and dragged it out and convinced the jury this is the one to win, and that won. And so
Yeah.
things like that happen, and it's my strength has been when with people that are designers. Ray Cappy was a designer, and he could relate to me, and Glenn Paulson, I mean, you put him down, Matt, but he was a designer, he could relate to me. And then Pele could relate to me, because I was a designer. And so I can only talk to designers. Those are the only people that get it. And so political people like Peter Cook or something, that's not going to go anywhere. Anyway, I think Ron Heron was a designer in that group, and Peter was a hustler in that group. And if you've seen what he's doing, I'm on Facebook with that guy, and he's knocking out all these beautiful graphic things, all the time. Still going strong.
Yeah. Do you consider yourself, I guess maybe the last thing before we all get dinner or whatever, do you consider yourself part of a specific style of California architect or group of California architects of your generation? Or is there, or national architects? Do you think there's any way of codifying it?
No, I actually, I was in Detroit when I did this scheme, so started the scheme, and I felt very connected to Detroit, and I don't feel it, I don't feel I mean, that's what Rainer Banham said. He's not known outside of Los Angeles, and he's done all this great stuff in that book. And I had Rainer Banham in my house, and I wanted him to do a book on me, and he got pissed off, but he was ready. I didn't realize at the time he'd already been diagnosed to die, so it wasn't something he wanted to do. Anyway, but I sent him a big stack of all my drawings, all my rationality, all this stuff, and he picks two images or one image. He picks one image and puts in his book, and I'd said to him something like, "You cocktail slipping asshole! I won't. I sent you a bunch of stuff, and you're reducing it to." He said, "Oh no, Glenn, oh, you're an important part of the book." And then he put that one image, but he could have done a very competent presentation, and he didn't. And I don't know what that is. It's like, and he says he was part of the London image. Okay, so he pushes archogram and things like that, and but then Martin Pauly, I don't know, Martin Pauly, he made the book, I think, Garbage Housing or something like that. And I was a friend of his, and he taught at UCLA, and he made, was it the Second Machine Age, best book was that Rainer Banham made, was the First Machine Age, and Martin Pauly made the Second Machine Age, and it was a terrible book. And it had me in it, but he got somebody to trace my image anyway, he just messed up, and so I haven't gotten the boost that from whatever this set me off, because there's an East Coast interconnection thing, that happens, and I don't know what that's about, but they never let me into that group, and so
Glenn,
today I had a nice experience with Mocha, and the guy said, well, you're beating your head. I said, I'm just beating my head against the wall, and he says, well, it might be ready to explode or something like that. And I said, what do you mean? I'm going to die? And he says, oh no, your time is coming. That's it. So maybe there is hope. I have no idea in that sense, but it's like functioning outside the whole, that stuff, if you're not famous, nobody listens to you. And that's the way it goes,
Here we are.
What is that about, Matt? You want everybody to listen to you. You got a big ego. I know you do. And you do, David. You both got big egos. You want everybody to listen to you, but you're not famous. So where is that going to get you? Anyway, are you going to be the Oakland architect or something? Or is that what it is? I don't know.
I mean, to what end? We were talking about this earlier today. Like, what will it get me? Fame? Like, where will I eventually be in the same place?
It's all about getting better work.
Yeah, but I mean, in the end, it doesn't matter. I mean, I feel like I'd rather chase happiness, I guess, or something than chasing fame. If I'm going to give up my life for something, I don't know.
But I always, you've told me your background, so I have a little bit of insight on that. And you want security, and so you got the security now. You got, there's a guy named that died recently. His name is David Gray. I guess he actually did some housing in Seattle and Berkeley area, I think, as well. And he went into development. He taught at USC, and he very talented. And but he worked with Fry Auto. He went over there, and anyway. And yeah, he did the sort of what you're saying. He sort of kicked back and bought a big building downtown in LA and restored it and led the good life. But he's dead now. And so I don't know what it's.
But either way, if he didn't do that and he built amazing award-winning buildings and got famous, he'd still be dead.
Yeah, I'd still be dead. But I guess I'm prejudiced, but I think that I've been blessed with that thing that you're saying. What drives you, Glenn? And I've been blessed with a feeling that what I do is important, and that's the thing that drives me. So, and I've heard it from other people. They said, "Well, Glenn, you still have your integrity about what you do," and it's true, but it gets whacked away at the edges when you're trying to make a buck like everybody else. But I still feel I have that in me, and every time I get whacked, I feel that's good because I still have it in me.
I think an important thing, though. I mean, there was something you just said, and I don't know what your words were, but it was that you feel what you do is important, right? And I think that's not so easy. It's like I was going to ask earlier, what's the message to the youth that you kind of talk about? How would you advise them? What would you tell them to do now with their careers? And I think that, believing that your work is important, whatever it is, if you find something that you feel is important, that's a hard thing to do. So if you can just do that, and it may not be what you're doing or what anybody else is doing. But I am curious what you would say to people, listening to this, if a young person who's listening and wondering what Glenn would advise them to do with their career nowadays. I asked Tom Main this question when I saw him speak at the AIA not too long ago, and he said, go into development.
Really?
Yeah.
No.
Yeah.
Really?
He said that the way that he did it, and, I mean, I don't know if I could quote him, but paraphrasing, he said the way he did it with getting into school and teaching and kind of entering competitions and gaining notoriety that way, it doesn't exist anymore. And he said that if you wanted to really do good work, go into development and control the process and make good buildings that way, because then you can make the decisions yourself.
That's a hard one. That's a lot harder than doing competitions and teaching.
For some people, I mean, that is ultimately, I've got a few years left, and I would plan to do another development deal.
I think that's wise advice, because as I said on the Green Machine project, if I just bought the trailer park and had done it on my own, I would have something that I felt was important. And if it was successful financially, I might have moved to the next thing, you know what I mean? So, yeah, I think that's good advice to become a developer. But that was interesting because I think on the Ray Cappy's memorial thing at SCI-Arc, I said something like, I'm the outsider and I'm always pushing the limits. And then Tom comes up to me afterwards and says, "No, Glenn, I'm the outsider." and I said, "Tom, no, you're not the outsider. You're a commercial developer."
Not anymore.
Anyway, so that's the difference. And he did a building. I don't hate him for doing it, but I did at that time. I said, "What's that building you're doing in New York and for Israel?" And he said, "Well, I don't really know. Well, that building is a weaponry building, and studying the CIA for Israel and all this stuff. It's all war oriented." And I said, "Gee, that's strange that an architect doesn't really even want to know what the building is going to be used for." And his response was, "I just do buildings, and whatever they're used for, that's it." And this reminds me of when I was giving that famous thing at SCI-Arc where I got blasted in '76 because
it's in the movie.
In the movie, but there's one line that wasn't in there. I said, "Look, what are those things in the ceiling? Indicating the gas jets to kill people." And architects have to be morally. I think the most important thing a person has to do is morally figure out what their life is about and pursue that with integrity. So, and that's what I would tell the youth. You got to figure that out. Otherwise, you live a life of, what did you say, Matt, of convenience, of enjoying the good wine or this and that. And I don't think that's going to lead to happiness. For me, it doesn't, but to other people, it does, obviously. So.
No, I think that I was saying, I think that I would agree with you, actually. I think that my comment was more about pursuing happiness, not the good life as seen by the luxury sort of marketers or something. I think that, but chasing fame can be just as deadly as chasing the dollar. I think Dave and I have talked about this too. The stuff that gets the most interest when I post it is stuff like a house on the beach. And people want a glass house on the beach, but I'm interested in posting provocative things that people haven't seen before, and they're not in, no one is really so interested or as interested. So if you want to get famous, feed people what they want to hear and see, and then you'll get there a lot faster. But it's deadly to your creativity and your potentially your moral compass and or anything else. I think chasing fame and chasing money probably aren't that far apart as an architect or anyone else.
Yeah, when you started SCI-Arc, Glenn, that was wasn't that a revolutionary act that you were actually saying, this is all we have to start our own school, this isn't working, what's out there? What?
Yeah, it was. We believed in what we were doing, and we felt that the students should be educated that way. And we were told that our director, Ray Cappy at the time, was not that guy. So we all left. And, I took the blunt of that whole thing because I had tenure at that point. And I lost, $100,000 right now a year, so which I could, and what I always use teaching for was to work on ideal projects. That was my whole world. And
Right.
I must say that I was thinking about this before this thing came on today. What really I've enjoyed is the love of my students. I mean, my students have been very good to me, and they continue to be nice to me. And so that has been very rewarding. Although I always went at teaching with the idea to build, it allowed me to build what I wanted. It gave me a base of money so I could build what I wanted. And I felt building, I agree with you, Matt, that building is important. So, and I always expected if you just show people the right thing, they'll do it, but it didn't happen that way. So anyway.
All right. Well, I mean, I think there were a few good things said over the last 2 hours or so, and it was
I mean, I find I mean, I don't know where this goes in the world or what people find out, or where they access whatever, but I enjoyed it. I always enjoy conversing with you, Glenn and Dave. I appreciate it.
Yeah, same here. And I'm so thankful for your time, Glenn. And I managed to not talk about outer space at all.
I mean, we could do another one. I think that, what you're talking about, Glenn, maybe more of a presentation.
I think you should go and edit this thing now, David. You should go in and just sort of splice out the better things and make it, because MoCA, Museum of Modern Art, today was very interested in what I told it this was going to happen, and they said, who's doing it? And I mentioned your names and architects, and so they thought so it's a fascinating, I thought it was going to be more structured, so it would be very rational for somebody looking at it to understand what was happening. So anyway,
well, that's a good critique.
bang ideas around, but we've had some ideas exchanged, and I thought the exchange was pretty good, and I respect both of you. So I always enjoyed you when I was there at the Academy and got whacked. And you guys, I remember going to that dinner after I got whacked, and I think David, you gave me some money, and you patted me on the head, Matt. That was about it.
I don't think I have any money back. I had no money back then.
Oh, I see. Anyway, but that was one time I was just really whacked out. I mean, really didn't have anywhere to turn.
I think the lack of structure maybe yields more impromptu and more interesting results. But again, we could do it where it's more of a presentation style, and you go through your projects and we talk about them. But I do like the kind of controversy and the emotive stuff, and where the thought-provoking conversation. I think it's great. The editing wise, I don't know what
all right, that's a different approach, and maybe that's the way you run it. Do you think people, I don't know, maybe I'm looking at where does it get it? I know that's not practical, Matt, but where does it get?
We had this conversation too. Dave and I had this conversation as well. I mean, but the question is, what I don't have an answer. I mean, I think that I'm constantly talking to people about this, and you look at somebody like David Foster Wallace, who wrote, Infinite Jest, and his whole thing was nobody ever discovered him, and he believed it was because he was a genius that nobody understood. And then when he got discovered and people started liking his work, it was a disaster for him. He ended up committing suicide because he felt like he had failed when people discovered him and started watching it. But I think that, if you give people what they want, it goes to the question of boxes that you were raising before. It's like you just give people what they're after, and is that interesting? I feel like there's a tension there between doing something that's unique and interesting and different, and just feeding people what they want to hear. And I don't know where you draw the line. I mean, I could probably write a script for what I think people want to hear. I don't know if it would be interesting for me. Is the problem.
Well, it goes back to that masses or asses. Is that the audience you want to appeal to? In other words, Do you
Right.
want to get down to that level that they're just down? I had a person come in the other day, and she just walked into my studio here, and all my walls are covered with interesting models and projects and this and that, and she didn't see any of it.
Well, that,
And
yeah.
and so that was her world. She later
Yeah.
said she didn't, the road coming out was too difficult. She never wants to come back again or something like that. And that was her world. So people are different, and our world is that they don't, other people walk in and they go down on their knees. So, people are quite different.
Well, that's why I think that from my perspective, like you had mentioned, or I think talked about this at one point, from my perspective, remove all the images. Like the images are a distraction from the ideas. If people want to know about the work, they can find it. It's easy enough to find it, and I think that the conversation that we have, you take 4 topics of interest that everybody's talking about or that are of interest to us or whatever, and you just talk about those 4 topics, and after 20 minutes of each you switch, and that's the structure. But I think that the ideas that are coming out of these conversations are far more compelling and kind of gripping than just kind of presenting, this is my, at least, and I'm not saying your work, Glenn, I'm saying if it were my work, here's the entrance, and you walk inside and here, it's like, that doesn't tell you. You can see that, you can see it in a video, or you can see it in an image, you can see it in other places, but to hear like what you were thinking when you did it, or how it drove you, I mean, that's what I think that's what I would want to hear. I don't know what other people would want to hear, but I think that's the most interesting piece, because I think you're such a fascinating character. Like, I want to know what goes on in your head. I can see the work. I look at the work all the time. I've seen it over many years,
No, but you don't understand it unless you go and look at
You,
the
you can
blog,
read it.
and you go step by step. And what I write on my blog is about 1/8 of what really needs to be written, and so on. And so it's just I suffer from a complex of I don't know. I was thinking about the other day of I never felt good about myself in the sense of being good looking, and my daughter
That's
died.
Matt's issue.
What?
That sounds like Matt.
And so when my daughter died, I started to look at all my pictures when I was younger, and God, I looked, fantastic. And so,
Right.
and I remember in grammar school, we had this big guy that looked like Rock Hudson, and he always got the beautiful girls, and nobody was interested in me. And so I always felt that I had to be the best athlete or do the best architecture to get the attention. And so that happened, and so that's where I end up. And so when you say, let's just discuss items, I say, I've got to have my picture over there. I got to have my scheme for this thing and talk about that, because that's my strength. It's not listening to me blob, jabber about something. That's my reaction. I'm not good looking enough now that anybody cares. So that's for sure.
Well, it could be both. It could be the words. I mean, I'm not trying to say you're good looking, Glenn,
right.
but you, but your words and your drawings might actually be equally compelling.
Well, we could talk about how to do round 2. It's no problem.
Well, we didn't talk about it today, but being professors, that is very dangerous.
Well, again, I've enjoyed structuralist YouTubes from different people I admire for years now. So just listening to people talk can be a really positive thing.
What's dangerous? What was dangerous? Sorry, I missed it.
Oh, having the power of being a professor.
Oh,
and having young minds in front of you.
yes.
Oh,
yeah. That is, you don't realize it at the time, but it's now the Me Too generation coming in yelling about that. And I examine my own life, and I think both of you as well could examine that so. That's, what I'm saying is that you seduce somebody through their brains, and because of, of your age or your work or whatever it is, and they're so desperate to learn something that isn't some, person at their own age just blabbing, and so they respect that, and so that goes with the territory. And I know it. I do it today. I go into the saloon, and we have a saloon here, and I'm watching a football game, and I had a couple that were obviously in love and about 30 years old, and they were playing cards, and here's this football game going on, and we got in conversation. I showed them my work and and then suddenly they were all sort of interested, and I basically seduced them through my work in about 20 minutes, and and they called and want to be connected, and their daddy had 40 acres out here, and I haven't heard back on that one, but anyway.
That sounds good.
Yeah, so that's the way it goes, and that wouldn't have happened if I didn't have the work there. And you're gonna, the work has to, be the element. And in our society, for some people that's attractive. For other people, it's not. They don't want to talk about architecture at all. It's so foreign, and they don't feel comfortable about it. And that, I go to parties and things like that, and I'll talk about general things, but I really want to talk about architecture, and it's so difficult. Let's put it that way. Yeah,
That's true.
so
Okay, well,
The wrap.
Yeah.
We should talk about it some more. I feel like we have the
Yeah.
opportunity.
and I'll maybe I'll talk to you, Matt, about whether we edit or not. And
Yeah, sure. Let's
yeah.
discuss that, and also let's continue talking about another one if possible.
Yeah.
And I will send you the biomorphic biosphere images that I just generated on AI. Glenn.
you really, that's frightening.
I'll put them on Instagram. I want to see it.
Put
Definitely.
them on Instagram. So this is my talk with Glenn. This is the reaction I had. This is my new take on it.
Yeah, I'm gonna have to do the same now when I get off. So yeah.
Thanks.
But it's true. I have other computer people that really want to do something, but it's true. It's such a seductive tool.
It
If you want
is.
to take it seriously, but so I wouldn't like you to do something frivolous unless you. Anyway.
I'm only sending it to you for the time being.
Okay.
Oh,
Well, I mean, you, Dave, actually.
oh,
Dave.
thank you. I appreciate it.
I'll text it to you guys here in a minute.
Okay.
All right.
Be
All right.
careful
Well,
with it, because I might
if you
react.
haven't had dinner, enjoy dinner.
Okay. All right.
I'll your
Well,
reaction.
that's interesting. What is it? I was talking to one of my friends that I've known since grammar school. And I said, "What's important in your life?" And he said, "Women," and then the next thing was food.
Dinner. Good.
Food. And old David is chomping at the bit for food. It sounds like. Okay, David.
Well, actually,
Right.
probably the other half of my beer.
Right. Okay.
All right. Talk to you guys later.
Bye-bye.
All right. Talk to you guys soon. It's a pleasure, Glenn. Thanks.
Leave. I pushed the button. Leave. Right. Okay.
Oh, I'm frozen.
Leave meeting.
Okay.